Lee Redmond held the world record for the longest fingernails at 28 feet in total length after growing them out for more than 30 years. She said she had to sleep in a special uncomfortable position and couldn't drive because of them. But she eventually lost them after she was ejected from the passenger seat in a 4-car pileup that resulted in serious injuries. For 60 years, an unknown figure dressed in black visited Edgar Allan Poe's grave on his birthday, January 19th. Starting in the 1930s, he would pour himself a glass of cognac and raise a toast in front of the grave, before leaving behind 3 roses and the unfinished bottle of cognac. The man never spoke and was never identified. In 1942, forest rangers discovered something disturbingly odd at a lake located high in the Himalayas. There were over 200 ancient skeletons with blunt force trauma to their skulls, but the strangest part was that they were from distinct populations that died about 1,000 years apart. Researchers say the lake may have served as a recurring death trap over the centuries, with many likely dying from sudden hailstorms, which explains the cracked skulls. Many of the skeletons can still be seen emerging from the thawing ice in the summer, some with their hair and flesh still intact. A 27-year-old beauty queen from Kosovo has reportedly died after attempting to flee from police. Güler Erdogan allegedly tried driving home while drunk until she ran into a police checkpoint. After a breathalyzer recorded her BAC as 3 times the legal limit, she decided to flee from the scene on foot, fearing that her modeling career was over. She ran over to the edge of the overpass and reportedly fell over by accident, plummeting 50 feet onto the 6-lane motorway below before she was fatally struck by a car. In 2012, a woman from South Carolina discovered that her ex-boyfriend of 12 years had been secretly living in her attic for several weeks. She'd been hearing strange noises and nails dropping from the ceiling of her bedroom, before eventually sending her nephew to investigate, who found the man sleeping on the attic's heating unit. The ex-boyfriend had also rigged the ceiling vents to apparently look into the woman's bedroom from above. Upon discovery, he fled the scene before police arrived but was later apprehended. Just last year, Nicolas Cage's son Weston was arrested after reportedly assaulting his mother, Christina Fulton. The woman says she rushed to Weston after hearing he set his apartment on fire, but upon her arrival, her furious son snapped, violently pulling her into an elevator by her hair before crushing and suffocating her. Fulton testified, "He shoved his thumb into my eye socket. The pain was excruciating. My vision went black. I was losing consciousness." She credited one of Weston's friends with potentially saving her life by intervening before the attack got too ugly. Weston was recently ordered to complete a 2-year mental health diversion program instead of serving prison time. In 2007, a man named Shannon Wisnant bought a storage unit at an auction in North Carolina, only to find a severed human leg when he opened the grill inside. He reported this to authorities, but soon decided he wanted to keep the leg and turn it into a money-making Halloween display for adults and children to pay to see. However, the man who the limb once belonged to caught wind of the story and said it was his own amputated leg that he lost in a plane crash and wanted to be buried with someday. After a long custody battle, the leg was eventually returned to its original owner. In 1988, Iranian man Mehran Karimi Nasiri was traveling to the UK when his briefcase containing essential refugee documents was stolen from him at a Paris train station. Unable to prove his identity to British immigration officials, Nasiri was returned to France and found himself completely stranded in Terminal 1 of Paris's main airport. He remained there for an astonishing 18 years, during which he became a fixture in the terminal, residing on a red bench surrounded by his belongings, writing in his diary, and engaging with airport staff and travelers. In 2006, Nasiri was hospitalized, finally ending his long stay at the airport. He later lived in a Paris shelter before returning to the airport in 2022, where he would spend his final days before dying of a heart attack in the same terminal. His unique situation inspired several works, most notably the 2004 film The Terminal, directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Hanks. In 2022, a 25-year-old woman named Sharaban wanted to escape personal and family issues in her life. So she devised a crazy plan to fake her own death and searched social media for lookalikes, eventually stumbling upon a German beauty influencer named Khadija who closely resembled her. After promising the model free beauty treatments, Sharaban kidnapped her and stabbed her 56 times before leaving the body in her car, attempting to pass it off as her own. The influencer was initially misidentified as Sharaban, until DNA testing revealed the disturbing truth, as her horrific plan resulted in life in prison. Australian woman Noella Rukunko became famous in 2015 after crashing her own funeral. She was presumed dead after her husband paid several hitmen to kill her upon wrongly suspecting that she was cheating on him. But instead, the hitmen spared her life since they knew her brother and refused to kill women or children. They revealed their husband's plot to her before providing all the evidence and helping her fake her own death. Days later, Noella walked into her own funeral that was organized by her husband, causing him to faint on the spot. He was later arrested, confessed to the crime, and sentenced to 9 years in prison for incitement to murder. When legendary baseball player Ted Williams died in 2002, his head was cryogenically frozen by the Alcor Life Extension Foundation so that he could potentially be revived in the future. But according to a former employee, his severed head was badly mishandled and allegedly used for batting practice with a wrench inside of the lab. Alcor has denied these dark allegations. In Washington state, a man tried to heat up a lava lamp on his stovetop for unknown reasons. The lamp exploded like a grenade, sending a shard of glass into his chest and puncturing his heart. He was found dead on his kitchen floor, surrounded by wax and broken glass. In 2016, a woman from China was found mummified inside an elevator at her apartment complex. A power outage had shut the lift down and no one realized she was inside. After power returned, no one checked the elevator for more than a month, and at some point she likely died from dehydration. When maintenance workers finally found her body, her hands were completely mangled and claw marks were found inside the elevator, as she desperately attempted to pry the doors open to free herself. In 2015, Denise Huskins was kidnapped from her boyfriend's California home by a masked intruder before being held for ransom. She was taken to a remote location where she was blindfolded, drugged, and raped multiple times over the next 2 days. When Denise was suddenly released, police accused her of faking the entire story like a scene straight out of Gone Girl. They mocked her during press conferences and labeled her as mentally unstable, until evidence finally surfaced proving that everything she'd said was true. Her kidnapper turned out to be a former Harvard-educated lawyer who had a history of stalking couples. This still frame is from the Collateral murder video released by WikiLeaks, captured moments before U.S. Apache helicopter pilots opened fire on local civilians and journalists in Baghdad 2007. The footage, which includes audio of the pilots making casual jokes during the attack, was leaked by whistleblower Chelsea Manning, who was subsequently sentenced to 35 years in prison, though this sentence was later commuted. No charges were ever filed against the military personnel involved in the incident. This has to be the strangest disorder I've ever heard of by far. Body integrity identity disorder is a rare neurological condition that causes the patient to believe that one or more of their limbs does not belong to them. This sense of disconnection often begins in early childhood, with sufferers reporting an intense and persistent desire to remove or disable the offending limb. Some patients become so distressed that they attempt self-amputation, using power tools, shotguns, or dry ice to damage the limb beyond repair. Renowned cricket historian Roland Bowen famously severed his own leg in 1968 while suffering from this disorder, and in the late 90s, Scottish surgeon Robert Smith controversially performed amputations on healthy patients who begged him to cut off one of their limbs. In many of these cases, patients report an indescribable sense of relief and psychological alignment following the removal of the unwanted limb. For them, the amputation is not a loss, but a long-sought correction in the harmony between their physical form and internal identity. Eminem's track Brain Damage was inspired by his real-life childhood bully, D'Angelo Bailey. In an interview, Bailey once boasted about beating Eminem so severely that it caused a concussion, bleeding from the ears, and temporary vision loss. In 2001, Bailey tried suing Eminem for slander over the song, but the case was thrown out by the judge who delivered the ruling in the form of a rap. This photo from 1977 shows a Rhodesian soldier interrogating a group of captured rebels. The men had to hold this position until they talked, and the first one to fall would receive a bullet in the forehead. In 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area randomly dropped dead after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. The incident changed packaging laws forever, but the killer was never caught. In 2021, a 39-year-old man was reported missing in Barcelona. Days later, his rotting corpse was found stuck inside a papier-mâché dinosaur statue located outside of an abandoned movie theater. He'd somehow dropped his phone inside of the statue, crawled in to retrieve it, got stuck, and died upside down. This is why you should never trust a pair of twins. In 2008, Swedish identical twins Ursula and Sabina Eriksson suddenly sprinted into oncoming traffic on the M6 motorway in London. Ursula was struck by a truck and Sabina by a car, yet both miraculously survived. But as paramedics tended to them, they both violently resisted help, with Sabina screaming, "They're going to steal your organs." She then punched a baffled officer and tried to run into traffic again. Ursula was hospitalized, but Sabina was released the next day despite continued erratic behavior. Just hours later, Sabina encountered a man who kindly offered food and a place to stay, only for Sabina to stab him to death the next day before jumping off a bridge while fleeing from police. Despite fracturing her skull, she survived yet again and was later sentenced to 5 years for manslaughter. There was no evidence that drugs or alcohol was involved in their sudden strange behavior, as the incidents have been chalked up to an episode of shared psychosis. After leaving the hit sitcom Different Strokes and struggling to find success as an adult actress, Dana Plato spiraled into addiction, poverty, and run-ins with the law. In 1991, Dana entered a Las Vegas video store with a pellet gun and demanded all the money in the cash register, after which the flabbergasted clerk called 911 saying, "I've just been robbed by the girl who played Kimberly on Different Strokes." Dana soon lost custody of her only child, was caught forging prescriptions, and attempted to salvage her career by posing for Playboy, but found little redemption. By 1999, she was a faded star clinging desperately to the hope of a comeback, but her appearance on The Howard Stern Show turned into a public humiliation. Stern and his callers openly mocked her claims of being sober for 10 years, with some cruelly suggesting she was just moments away from another downfall. Within 24 hours of the interview, Dana died alone from an overdose of prescription pills at the young age of 34. In 1918, Austrian artist Oskar Kokoschka commissioned a life-size doll of the love of his life Alma Mahler after the end of their affair. He requested that it be constructed with swan skin with the feathers still attached, and stuffed with sawdust, cotton wool, and horsehair to mimic the softness of flesh. He even asked for anatomically accurate features, including a mouth with teeth and a tongue, and specified that the doll's intimate parts be perfect and luxuriant. The result was apparently so lifelike and disturbing that Kokoschka's butler suffered a stroke immediately upon seeing it. It's illegal to save baby sea turtles from predators if you don't have a permit. So if you ever see this happening before your eyes, you must let nature take its course unless you're willing to risk jail time. Why? In 2001, a 6-year-old boy was undergoing a routine MRI scan in New York after surgery to remove a brain tumor. While he was sedated inside the machine, a metal oxygen tank was accidentally brought into the MRI suite, where the powerful magnetic field violently pulled it across the room. The tank struck the boy in the head with devastating force, fracturing his skull and causing brain injuries that were fatal. Jeremy Renner's snowplow accident in January 2023 proved to be even more graphic than initially reported. While attempting to assist a stranded vehicle near his home, he was suddenly pulled under his 14,000-pound snowplow, which crushed his body with so much force that he later recalled hearing the crunching of his own bones. Renner sustained 38 broken bones, a collapsed lung, severe cranial trauma, and required extensive reconstruction with metal plates in his chest, legs, and face. Among the most horrifying details he later revealed was that the impact had dislodged his left eyeball so severely that he could see it sticking out with his right eye. Despite the injuries, Renner remained conscious throughout the ordeal, fully aware of his condition, and at one point attempted to write what he believed would be his final words to his family. The actor has since regained much of his physical function, thanks largely to his daughter's support and his own relentless determination to continue living. During a match in Germany in 1993, star tennis player Monica Seles was stabbed in the back with a 9-inch kitchen knife by Günter Parch, an obsessed fan of her rival Steffi Graf. Parch was infuriated that Seles had overtaken Graf as the #1 player in the world, and admitted that he wanted to injure Seles so severely that she couldn't play tennis for a long time. Following the attack, Seles took a 2-year hiatus from pro tennis and never fully regained her prior dominance. The attacker received a suspended sentence with probation and psychological treatment, a verdict that sparked widespread outrage across the sports world. In 2019, a French man accidentally killed his friend during a fight and in a panic stuffed his body under his mattress. To avoid suspicion, he slept on it for nearly 2 years while regularly spraying air fresheners and bug repellent to mask the stench. He was eventually caught when the odor became overwhelming for his neighbors. In 1984, California man David Burke was fired from his airline job for a petty theft. So he smuggled a loaded gun onto the flight, shot the pilots mid-air, and deliberately crashed the plane into the ground, killing all 43 passengers on board. Investigators later found a note in his pocket addressed to his former boss stating, "I asked for some leniency for my family, remember? Well, I got none, and you'll get none." Actor Michael Berryman was born with ectodermal dysplasia, a rare genetic disorder that left him without hair, fingernails, or sweat glands, stripping him of the body's natural ability to regulate temperature. His striking appearance made him a fixture in horror films, most notably in The Hills Have Eyes, which became a life-threatening ordeal to film. Shot in the Mojave Desert, Berryman was forced to endure heavy costumes and layers of makeup under a merciless sun, all while his body lacked the ability to sweat or cool itself. He later described the experience as grueling and admitted that without strict precautions from the crew, he could have easily collapsed and died from heat stroke during the production. For years, Ray Brent Marsh, operator of the Tri-State Crematory in Georgia, failed to cremate hundreds of bodies entrusted to him. Instead, he left 339 corpses scattered in the woods, stuffed into sheds, or piled into vaults. Some decayed beyond recognition, others mummified or still in body bags, bloated and oozing fluids as the stench reportedly spread for miles. Families were unknowingly given cement powder, sawdust, or crushed concrete in urns, led to believe it was the ashes of their loved ones. Marsh claimed the cremation machine was broken, but it was fully functional, leading to him giving bizarre shifting excuses, such as the claim that he actually opposed cremation. He eventually pleaded guilty to nearly 800 charges and spent 12 years in prison. Actor David Harbour has been very open about his dark past, particularly his struggles with mental health, alcoholism, and suicidal thoughts. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder at age 25 after a severe manic episode, Harbour was admitted to a mental hospital when he started believing he was receiving divine messages and was possibly the Antichrist. Prior to this, he spent years battling alcohol addiction, which began in his teens and only worsened in college, leading to a life he described as lonely, directionless, and self-destructive. He's admitted to violent emotional outbursts during manic episodes, such as smashing mirrors and feeling like a danger to himself and others. At his lowest, he felt like he was slowly disappearing and contemplated taking his own life. Harbour now credits acting with saving his life since it gave him a way to channel his mental chaos into performance. Now sober and in treatment, he describes himself as someone who enjoys consciousness too much to ever return to his old ways. While filming The 7-Year Itch in 1954, a crowd of over 1,500 New Yorkers swarmed 51st Street to witness Marilyn Monroe's now iconic skirt-blowing scene. As her white dress billowed up with each gust from the subway grate, onlookers reportedly shouted, "Higher, higher," turning the shoot into a public spectacle. Monroe's possessively abusive husband, Joe DiMaggio, was reportedly furious over the display. That night, he physically assaulted her so violently that she filed for divorce just 3 weeks later, citing mental cruelty as the reason. Just recently, American YouTuber Mikhailo Polyakov was arrested after illegally traveling to North Sentinel Island, home to an uncontacted and highly vulnerable tribe protected by Indian law. Known for his danger tourism stunts, Polyakov used a dinghy and GPS to reach the Forbidden Island, where he left a coconut and a can of Diet Coke as offerings while he recorded the encounter. His actions violated strict laws banning all contact with the Sentinelese to prevent disease exposure and cultural disruption. It was his third attempt to approach the violent tribe, and he now faces up to 5 years in prison amid widespread outrage over his idiotic stunt. Standout college basketball star Len Bias was drafted second overall in the 1986 NBA draft, hailed as a future legend and often likened to Michael Jordan for his explosive athleticism. But just 2 days later, while celebrating his selection with friends, Bias collapsed after snorting high-grade cocaine in a University of Maryland dorm room. He suffered a massive cardiac arrhythmia as his heart seized violently and he started convulsing. Despite the desperate attempts to revive him, Bias was pronounced dead within hours. His sudden drug-induced death sent shockwaves through the sports world, forever turning him into a tragic symbol of unrealized greatness. In 2010, 35-year-old Steve Carter made a startling discovery when he found an age-progressed image of himself on a missing children's website. Though he knew he was adopted, this led to the shocking discovery that he was actually Marks Barnes, a child that was abducted in Hawaii in 1977. When he was just a baby, his biological mother had kidnapped him during a custody dispute, changed both their identities, and raised him under a fake name. DNA tests confirmed his true identity, and after 34 years, he was reunited with his biological father, who had never stopped searching for him. Muppets creator Jim Henson's death was made all the more tragic by how easily it could have been prevented. In May of 1990, he dismissed what seemed like mild flu-like symptoms, unaware that his body was actually under attack by a rare strain of Group A streptococcus. The bacteria ravaged his lungs, filling them with blood and fluid as he slipped into septic shock. By the time he stumbled into the ER, several of his organs were already shutting down, as doctors described it as being hit by a freight train of bacteria. Despite frantic attempts to save him, Henson died at age 53, 20 hours after arriving at the hospital. Medical experts later said that if he had arrived just a few hours earlier, he likely would have survived. In a chilling discovery, archaeologists have found the first physical evidence of ancient Roman gladiators battling wild animals, an 1800-year-old skeleton in York, England bearing lion bite marks on the pelvis. Excavated from Driffield Terrace, a site believed to be a gladiator cemetery, the remains belong to a man aged between 26 and 35. The bite marks on his pelvis showed no signs of healing, indicating that the injuries were most likely fatal. The gladiator was also found to have been decapitated, either as a ritual practice or mercy killing after the brutal mauling. Chandler from MrBeast videos suffers from a genetic eye condition called a chromatopsia that only allows him to see the world in shades of white, black, and gray. It's a rare form of color blindness where all three cone types are completely absent from the eye, resulting in the inability to perceive any colors whatsoever. Scottish guitarist Les Harvey, known for performing with multiple rock bands throughout the 60s and 70s, narrowly escaped death in a fatal car crash in 1965, only to be fatally electrocuted on stage in 1972 after touching an ungrounded microphone. This gravestone is shared by twin sisters Emily and Minnie Dodsworth. Emily lived for just 2 days, while Minnie lived for over 100 years. In 2003, a Houston doctor stepped into an elevator when its doors malfunctioned and suddenly closed on him. The elevator then shot upward unexpectedly before the man could fully enter, instantly severing his head and shoulders while leaving the rest of his body in the hallway outside. A young nurse inside the elevator was physically unharmed but severely traumatized after she was stuck inside the elevator with the doctor's remains for several hours.